Hello, my name is Dr. Maya Byfield. My business is The Phenomenal STEMist. I'm so excited to be here in Orange County because it's where I live. I live in Apopka, Florida. And I decided to make this business because I saw a need for underrepresented students to be successful in STEM, which stands for science, technology, engineering, math. And the best way I can do that is just provide products for parents to prepare them, whether it's a book or online STEM camps or just video podcasting. My goal is to transform this community, especially those who are underrepresented. And the way to do that is to help parents understand their children's minds and basically develop them at different stages of their lives to be prepared for a successful STEM career. Thank you so much. That's why I'm here. Hey, 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 it's the Phenomenal STEMist. What's going on, beautiful people? Glad to know that you are all here. It's just three of us today. Of course, you got Mr. Howard Webley, microbiologist extraordinaire. You have Dr. Kamoy Harris, uh, OBGYN extraordinaire. And then, of course, little old me, professor of biology. Jamal's not on yet. And Rochelle said that she's gonna come back in January. Shout out to her and her daughter for recovering. But we're gonna talk about something very, very, very interesting today, and we're gonna be. I told them we're gonna be a little. We're gonna be safe. We're gonna be safe. Just to remind you all, phenomenal STEM year prep camps. Feel free to check out www.phenomenal stemist.com. And if you want to get the book From the Womb to University, check it out on Amazon. How to Prepare a Successful STEM Student from the Womb to the University, Phenomenal STEMist. All right, with the commercial away, I think I'm this is three of us. Well, we're gonna keep it this way. You don't have to be all up in the grill. I want to talk about uh, microaggression today. Microaggressions. So microaggressions are statements, actions, incidents that are subtle, um, indirect ways of discriminating against members of marginalized groups, uh, racial, ethnic minorities, etc. Um, and so we are underrepresented minorities, African Americans, and we've been in the workplace for a while. And we're not here to talk bad about our workplaces, right? But we want to talk about, some examples of what microaggressions are so that we can really train the community, right? So here's my first question. Uh, and of course you can say hi to the when you answer your question. What are some common microaggressions that you may have experienced or witnessed in the workplace? Maybe some specific examples.
Um, well, as I was mentioning to you, I could talk about this for days. But I think that the biggest thing is that there's always an assumption that you aren't who you are. There's always the
Yes.
assumption that I hardly do. I'm for years. I've been doing this for a long time, and hardly will someone just look at me and assume that I'm the doctor. That just usually never happens. It's always something else. And even after introducing yourself as the doctor, they'll later call the nurse manager and say, I haven't seen the doctor today. And sometimes you've seen the patient more than once.
Right.
Um, or, even sometimes if you're heading to a meeting and you step into a meeting with maybe people you don't know, again, the assumption is never that you are the physician, you are the one who is responsible for the care of, these patients, things like that. That's probably the most common thing that I see happen in my field.
Yeah, yeah. The need to prove that I exist, that I'm for real. Like, I see it a lot in terms of security, uh I could have the tag that says faculty professor, and they use, oh, you look so young. Y- there's professors that look younger than me, and now I dress like students more now than I have in the past, because I'm trying to stay young now. Now that I'm in my mid 40s. Um, but I've had professors see me park with my tag and call security to say there's a student parking in the, yeah. I've walked in rooms with my three stripes, and they're like, I'm talking about my robe that says three stripes with a doctorate on. Like, oh, you're not supposed to be in this room. You're oh, I get it all the time. I gotta prove that I belong, and that can be exhausting sometimes. And so I totally understand. Like, I thought medical school was enough. I thought PhD school was enough, but it's a daily fight. What about you, Howie?
Yeah, I like the way you phrased it there with this, using the word assumptions, right? Like there's these, it's so weird because it's not, I've experienced, I guess more blatant type of racism in school, places like that, in the workplace, because there isn't supposed to be discrimination, right? It tends to show up as these these assumptions,
Yeah.
that sort of arise. I think most of what I've experienced, because of what I do, where it's more like a laboratory environment, and also when I was in the field, m- m- most of the assumptions that I've run into is just a questioning um, of what's that word? I was going to say ability. It's not ability, but like questioning of uh, oh my gosh, what's the word? Credentials,
Credentials, yeah, yeah.
uh,
Even if you got the three stripes,
right? It's that
even
kind of
even if
thing.
you got the tag that says faculty, like you do.
Feel like I've gotten more of the in the field. I've gotten so outside, so dealing with the public, I've gotten the so where'd you go to school? I've gotten the oh, so and then the follow up. So what'd you study? It because it's trying to get at are you how
You
qualified
qualified,
are
are
you?
you? Yeah.
And you're here doing this work, so you're obviously qualified, right? But there's a question of like, wow, so what it sounds to me like what could have possibly what was your route? What was your how'd you get there? How did you get here?
Yeah,
Like,
how did you get here?
you're here, but how did you get here? Like that's the kind of thing. That's the sentiment. That's what it makes me feel like, right? And then I've also experienced that, in house with people who are, sort of meeting me for the first time, at the workplace, and because that's just a workplace kind of thing where people are basically sizing you up, and wanting to see what you're, you know, where they stand, with you. How long have you been? How long have you been? How long have you been with the agency? How long have, you know? And I don't know. Again, other people maybe, maybe they ask everybody the same question. I don't know. I have no idea, but it always feels a little different.
Yeah,
It always
feels
feels a little
different. I don't care. I don't care what they say. I know anyway. I don't think people are calling security on others. Yeah. Um, Marvin is saying, "Hey, been a minute."
Which Marvin
Marvin
is that?
Marvin Simmons. Marvin Simmons. You know. Yeah, yeah. Here's some other examples of microaggressions. And I teach it in the context of students. Like when a black students walk into a physics room, and the professor asks, "Do you need help finding your class?" Like, right? Because black students don't take physics, right? Um, that happens more than often than not, especially at PWIs. That is extremely disheartening for a student of color. Never do that if you're a faculty member. There are a lot of students that show up at the wrong class, but you don't want to take the risk of making that assumption. Stop making these kind of assumptions. That's the key word I think that Kamoy said. In the beginning of your class, just say, yes, this is physics 101. Be there on time and make sure you say this is physics 101. And then the people who are in the wrong class will get up. Don't assume. Um, y- uh, Things like uh not even that's like feeling clutching purses, but that's a common microaggression, right? You're not saying that anything directly to the person, but if a black person walks into an elevator and you guard yourself, that's a microaggression. That's a subtle way of saying that they're a threat. It's about play. It's about the caste system in general. It's about where you belong. Like, stay where you belong. You don't belong here. Stay in your place. And if you do it aggressively, then that's not microaggression, right? Stay in your place, you N word, right? That's racism straight up. But if you still say it in a way that makes me feel like I don't belong here, that's even though it's not aggressive, it's still saying, hey, you stay in your place, right? Here's the next question. How have you personally dealt with microaggressions when they occur? Like, what strategies have you found effective? Now, I haven't. I'll give y'all time to think about that. I haven't managed this. I've been in the game over 20 years, right? In science in general, in over 20 years. I've been teaching for 15, and I haven't mastered it yet. I just smile. I smile. I just let it go. Um, and I remember it happening. I remember having a conversation about it, and the institution was like, you know what, let's have a conversation about it. And why haven't you told anybody about it? And finally, we you speak up about it. I did speak up about it, and it got handled. um and one of the questions is, why did you wait so long to say? And I would say, I just felt it was par for the course. I just felt that the beginning of the semester I would have to gird up myself and say, okay, I'm gonna have to prove myself to everybody that I belong here, that I'm in the right spot. But to my point here, my main point is, the way you deal with it is that you speak up about it. You go to the proper channels to say, this is an issue. I keep getting targeted by so and so. What do you do? What have you done outside of just wear the mask and smile, or finally speaking up about it? That's what I finally did.
I never spoke up about it. And just like you, I would just, yeah, put your mask on, and then, I shouldn't say I never dealt with it, but I never dealt with it at work. I would find my community and probably just vent about it just to get it out. But in the moment, it's, yeah, you put on a mask and you try to prove them wrong, right? You try to, make sure you're doing your job, trying to prove yourself constantly. Um, and of course, it does, unfortunately, that kind of thing affects you because now you're starting to doubt yourself, right? Now you're starting to think, are they right? You know, do I really belong here? Am I really qualified? You start to doubt yourself. Um, and the thing that really bothers me about this whole these whole microaggressions is that if at any point you say, "Oh, I'm going to speak up," because that's really what you should do, you're worried about being labeled as the angry black woman,
Yeah.
right? Or the aggressive black man.
Yeah.
Um, and that's the thing that bothers a lot of us, which is why we just don't
Don't
say
say
anything
anything.
about it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
don't say anything.
you take it home, and hopefully you have a community. Not everybody has that, where you can just talk about it and get it out, so it doesn't bottle up and explode. But yeah,
That's what I said when they asked me, "Why didn't you say anything?" I said, "I do to my mother." And we take it to our own communities and vent. We do not trust the establishment to even say anything. Yeah, go ahead, Howie.
Yeah. I depends on the situation.
Mhm.
In instances where, like I said, I'm dealing with the public, there's no, who am I going to speak to there, right? That's, and again, that's when I was doing field work. Uh, Part of my strategy, actually, when I was in the field, was developing rapport. So I leveraged it, actually.
Mm.
Um, because I didn't want to develop a sort of rift. Because if I'm continuing on in work with the public, a particular individual or group of individuals, and I need their attention, I need their, I didn't muddy the waters, even if that was their intention. So for
Mhm.
me, I went in because either way I was still in. So that's why I say it depends, because in that instance I was actually in the position of authority. So I didn't have to, I didn't have to address it. I could continue on my normal course of what I came to do, right? But what I did in order to gain rapport was I answered, like, so when I said they asked the question, sort of looking at credibility and so forth, want to see, and I answered the question. I'm like, oh, because I was proud of my route, actually. So I said, oh yeah, I would say, yeah, I went to this school, and and man, it was a blessing, man. I really, they had an awesome, you know um program that I really, appreciated. It made me feel that much better about what I do. So, if you have any kids that I literally went that route. I would say, like, I don't know if you have any kids who are interested in this sort of thing, like, you should really, encourage them along. Like, I would really go in and leverage it,
Mhm.
um, but when it came to at work, I sort of would do the same thing, because I'm an educator. I'm a I like to inform people. So it was the same sort of thing. And when I did it in the work environment, that also was a thing of, like, because I already knew why I was here. Like, it was already given, like, I'm qualified. But again, I would also just talk about, the route, and the sometimes talk about the struggle. I would assume so. My responding assumption, right, was that you understand about race issues. So there are people who I would talk up about it. I would, like, not necessarily talk up about what I was currently experiencing, but talk up about the struggle. I would speak about the struggle, coming from where I'm coming from, coming from the inner city. I don't know, and I would relate. I'm like, I don't know, where are you from? where are you from? Like, where were you brought up? Because if you want to size me up, then let's size up. Let's see what. But I'm not coming from a work standpoint because we're both here doing the work.
Right.
I'm really coming from. I'm actually touching on a moral standpoint. I'm really touching on where are you from. Where I'm about to. I can inform you about where I'm from. I can tell you because I see where you're going. So I actually take, and that's I said, this is just with coworkers like that I've seen. Again, depending on the situation, because in that instance, I have time to have the conversations. So I leverage it by using the opportunity to learn more about that person. And when you
Mm.
learn more about that person and they learn more about you, then they realize that, oh, you cool peoples. Like, and I feel you cool peoples, unless you're really trying to get at me. Now, if that's the situation, then we have a different situation overall.
So you build rapport. Use it as a way of leverage to build rapport. With me, I'm not really good at building rapport, especially if it's people doing microaggressions. But a lot of the times it's just not intentional. Is but it is, in my opinion, low expectations, and that can be frustrating for people like me who I feel like we really worked hard to get where we were, and for somebody to just look at us and just have low expectations is it's pretty frustrating. Saying things like, here's another microaggression, like affirmative action. That's what they got rid of it now, but affirmative action, or the program that you're running, it's for diversity, right? Like, yeah, like I don't have the ability to run a research program. I don't have the ability to run, and not that I don't have a program that's that has a focus on diversity, um, but I've had other programs that are not, you know, and so it's just, yeah, it, it's hard to build rapport. But to your point, Howard, it's in order to transform people's minds, you have to teach them. You
And
have to
and
teach
again,
them.
like depending on like, because if I'm dealing with somebody who's in authority, right, over me,
Yeah.
again, my situation is kind of because I have so much seniority. I still take it as an opportunity um, to relate to that individual. The only time it messes with me, honestly, since we're learning here, the only time it messes with me is when I can sense actual ill intent.
Ill intent. Yeah.
That 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 cause I'm like a deer in headlights when it comes to actual ill intent.
Got you. Got you. All right. Here's another question. In your experience, how do microaggressions impact the work environment or workplace culture in the STEM fields? Like, what do you think the broader consequences are when there's rampant microaggressions? Um, I'll start to give y'all some time to think about the answer. I think where I am, it can impact students. I gave the classic example of, can I help find your class? Like, if you don't believe a black male belongs in your class, if you have that assumption, it comes out in the way you teach, right? And then that can have an impact on pass rates, and pass rates for African Americans being so abysmal lead to graduation rates for African Americans being abysmal. And then graduation rates, like I always give the example about that physician who was a biochemist, who was able to make a concoction to remove that glue out of that girl's hair, right? When everybody was laughing at her for putting gorilla glue in her hair, it was a black man, a biochemist physician, that did pro bono to save her. And overall, it's documented that there are greater health comes for African American when they have an African American physician. So by you having a microaggression and stopping black people from becoming physicians, it's a cascading effect on the health of my community. It's huge to me. It's huge. So I think there's a massive effect in the environment um, in terms of students. In terms of faculty, there's just not enough black faculty, period, in all institutions, right? So if there are microaggressions in the context of assumption that they don't belong or they're not the right fit, how many scientists didn't get positions because they say, oh, you're not the right fit, that every black person who's who's qualified, every black person who's qualified knows that term, because that's what they give to us to not hire us, because they can't use Howard the fact that we don't have the qualifications. We got the qualifications. Many of the times, way more qualified than most. So they got to use oh, you're not the right fit, you know? So it's impactful. Yeah. What do you guys think? What do you think are the broader consequences when there are microaggressions, and how do they impact the workplace?
My biggest concern for it is when we start doubting ourselves. Um, I've definitely seen. I think, as you mentioned, with students, when I started as pre med in undergrad, started out with so many people, but a lot of people dropped out because they felt like this wasn't for me. I
Yeah.
can't handle this.
Right.
Some of them were told they couldn't handle it.
Right.
I remember when I started, and I do want to point this out, that sometimes microaggressions can also come from your own people.
Yep. I was going to talk about that.
Because when I started undergrad, I went to City College in New York, and I met a professor who told me, he's like, "Why are you here? Why are you at this school? It's too hard for you. You should go to a community college where you can get your grades up, and then you can transfer into a senior college." And I'm like, he doesn't know me at all. He's just meeting. Actually, somebody introduced me to him so he could be my mentor. He never looked at any of my grades, anything from. He just made this blanket statement, and it was a black man. I was very, and I was also brand new in the country. I think that was probably my first experience. I didn't even know that's what it was at the time.
Mhm.
But when he said that to me, I was very hurt. And I wondered, like, should I change schools? Is school going to be too hard for me to be able to get my grades up so I could get into medical school? Um, but I think that a lot of those things are said to our people, and they feel like, especially if you don't do well on an exam or something, you start to feel like, oh yeah, this is too hard, this is not for me. And then just a handful, right? You have hundreds of students sometimes, and just a handful will actually make it out. And I think a lot of it is because they start to believe that some of these things are actually true and they can't do it.
Yeah, I've had in grad school an advisor tell me, don't take molecular genetics and biochemistry together. It's going to be too hard for you. And that was the standard core pathway. And I'm like, what do you? I mean, straight up talked. She obviously didn't even look at my GPA. She didn't look at my transcript, because I've taken biochem, cell and molec. I said I took physics, genetics, and organic chemistry in the same semester. Like, plus 21 hours. Like, I can handle two science classes together. But they told me, no, don't do it. And I did it anyway. Thank God I went to a HBCU that really empowered me. But there's some black professors that will tell you no, that you can't, especially at these PWIs. And there's some advisors who do the same. That's microaggression. And they come from your own too. Howard.
Yeah, I definitely resonate with that one. I experienced that one. um, It was tough though. I started off on academic probation, and once I realized that college was real for myself, that's when I kicked stuff into gear. And every semester I just went higher and higher and higher GPA wise, and dug myself out that hole. But the struggle was that I did reach a point where I was taking, a heavy load like that, or I desired it. I started taking a heavy load. I was increasing. The trend was going upward, upward. And when I wanted to continue on that pathway, I ran into advisors who were saying, at my PWI, who were saying, who were trying to prevent me from, or influence me not to go that route, which would have given me a whole other semester, which would have given me a whole other amount of pay. And
Yeah.
I was like, listen, no, I'm on this upward trend, and it was literally some folk. Tell the story. I had to go above the advisor. I had to go. I went to the dean of the college to get approval for those credits, and that was me. That was me just saying, calling up my mom and saying, hey, and I had another advisor who was a person of color who was like, hey, the worst they could say is no. And if I hadn't had those couple of elements, yeah, I would have went along with what they were saying. And when I went to that dean, I pleaded my case. I said, look at my academic performance for the last, couple semesters all the way up to now. And she looked at me. She realized that I meant business, and she signed off on it. And but why do I have to go through all of that? You see,
Exactly.
is the struggle. And then I tell a
Exactly.
story about how yeah, being you know with that crazy curve in intro intro bio, with the weeding out process, intro bio, general chem, and so forth. And all of us were coming back to the dining hall, with our heads, kind of low, and we're all talking about it. And my non STEM buddies, who were people of color, that small community that we did have, they were definitely asking, like, what's your major again? Like, man, I can't even pronounce that. Like, what's my major? What's your major again? Okay. Are you sure that's so what'd you get? Howard, what'd you get? What'd you get? And it's like, well, this is what I got, but that's the curve. It's a crazy curve, what you explain and they don't understand. And they're definitely saying to you, man, you sure that's for you? You sure you're in the and so just the impact of, how when you don't have, you're away at school, you don't have family, you don't have all of these different elements, this really can influence you and just make it harder.
Yeah, so
That's the
much
issue
harder.
about the microaggressions. It hits you emotionally.
It hits you emotionally. It hits us emotionally, strong. And something that stood out to me in terms of what you said was it could impact you financially. Like you would have had to take a whole other semester,
Whole semester.
right? I want advisors to recognize what you really need to be careful about how you're guiding students of color, especially the ones that are very motivated. And students of color, this is kind of your answer to your second question, like how did you deal with it? Howard, you became an advocate for yourself.
Had
You
to.
have to be a, you have to be you have to be a, you have to fight strong. Like I had to be like, I'm taking it. Like you had to be like, no, I'm gonna go above you. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna go and I'm gonna be a strong advocate. It takes a toll on us emotionally, but at least it won't take a toll on us financially. you
But I
know?
didn't even know that that was a possibility, right?
Yeah.
That's the other
Somebody
thing
had to tell
too.
you.
Somebody had to tell me. So,
Yeah.
and we've seen a number of our fellow, students that didn't come back the next semester for a number of
Yeah.
these reasons,
Yeah. Yeah. And you gotta have somebody to sign off.
right?
Cause that dean could have easily said no. And people don't understand decisions, how decisions that are made and the things that are said has such a strong impact on whole communities,
Hmm. Wow.
right? Like the wealth gap so is smaller in STEM fields, right? But there are overrepresentation in white and Asians, and extremely underrepresentation in Black and Latino. Do you understand if, let's say, there are 15% of the population Latino and 15% of the population African American, like only about 4 to 5% are in STEM. If you just increase us 10%, right, for us to go to 10%, 15% in STEM, just that. I'm not even asking every Black person to be in STEM. But if you can get us to just representation, do you know how massively you can impact financially our community? And do you know how massively, by your microaggressions and your decisions, are robbing our communities of finances? Microaggressions seem subtle, but it's strong. It's impactful. It's powerful. It has broad consequences on our lives. I just like our health outcomes and our financial outcomes. Yeah. All right. Here's another question. You want to say something, Howard?
Real quick, I was going to say, and just this is just to people such as yourself and other people who out like that dean. One thing I learned from that experience, and I was young, I don't remember what year that was, probably about sophomore, beginning of junior year, maybe. And that dean, I learned from that dean, just that little interaction that I had with that person. That was a true educator.
Mm-hmm.
That person was a true educator. She listened to my situation, and and she challenged me, and said, "Well, what's your what's your plan? What
Mm-hmm.
because that's something that normally would have to, you probably have to write that out, like what's going to be your plan, and so forth." And I verbalized it, and when I verbalized it, that's when she said, "Okay," but here's what she said to me. She said, "I'm gonna sign." She's like, I believe in what you're saying." She said, "I believe in what you're saying. I'm gonna sign off on it." And when she signed off on it, then she said, "Make me proud."
Yeah.
Like that kind of stuff, I didn't know at the time, but I'm like, you come across a couple of people like that, a couple of educators, teachers like that in your journey, and that was impactful to me. That was somebody who said, "Man, I believe in you. Like this experience, you know, uh, knock you down. Like go at it." And sometimes that's the little thing, the little push that you need. And a lot of times that's what you don't get. First of all, you don't get it. And then the microaggression just sucks it out of you. Whatever you do have, it sucks it out of you.
Yeah. Oh, it sucks. That's what microaggressions do. They suck the life out of us. It's just emotionally, because we can't. We can't put a finger on it, but we know what we feel. It hits us internally. What advice would you give to STEM employers and managers on how to recognize and address microaggressions in the workplace? Like, what training programs do you think would be beneficial? I think one of the biggest training programs is the Harvard implicit bias training. I think everybody in the country, in the workplace, should check for their implicit biases. Um, that's huge for me. I think employers and managers should get training themselves, and then ask their underrepresented and marginalized uh, faculty, doctors, microbiologists, scientists, whatever, ask them about what they've experienced so that they can have a idea of what it is. Because if you're oblivious to it because you haven't experienced it yourself, you need to talk to somebody. Have a conversation with the Black and Latino and LGBTQ. There's all kinds of different types of female. There's microaggressions that can happen in multiple ways. Talk to them, ask them questions. What do you guys think STEM employers and managers should do?
I'm not familiar with any specific program. I know a lot of institutions will have their own training on implicit bias. I think that's important, but I also think that there has to be also just people taking some responsibility to learn something about history. And it doesn't necessarily mean that somebody has to like sit you in a program and teach you. Like if you want to make a difference in how you interact with others, especially people of marginalized community, you need to understand why they're marginalized. And there is a ton of history in this country about why they're marginalized. And, I find that a lot of people live in a bubble. They're fed a certain kind of information. They were taught a certain kind of information in school. And then that kind of gets perpetuated throughout. And that's where a lot of these microaggressions come from. So if they understood the actual true history about some of these things, I think it would help with how you interact with these communities or interact with these people, especially when they're your employees or you're working alongside them in the workplace.
Howard?
Yeah. So unfortunately, right, there's this huge um, reluctance that a lot of organizations are having these days when it comes to
Yeah. Trading.
having conversations about diversity, equity, inclusion, whether it be, and I say conversations, but whether it be any form of training.
It's true.
They're cutting complete programs. They used to have, they started to open up offices dedicated to this sort of thing. And now they're saying this is an economic burden. So they're cutting it completely. So you have that struggle. That used to be the primary, that, for a time, that was the primary way. And for many organizations, that's still a thing that they keep on the docket, right? So in light of that, right? Even if you try to mention it, right, you may get shot down, right? You may get shot down. We know, many people know and understand the benefit that would have on organization, and the research is there to show the benefit that that'll have on your entire organization, right? So what happens is, for me, it's emotional intelligence. The one you mentioned, that implicit bias is a huge one. That Harvard one is a huge one. Couple that with training on emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence now is going to say, hey, this is not necessarily limited to, right? Because we're trying to get in, right? So
Right.
emotional intelligence is saying this is not necessarily limited to minorities, become underrepresented groups, right? Emotional intelligence is talking about everybody. It's about, we all pretty much suck at relating to people. And the more if we don't consider if we don't consider how we interact with people, we're always going awry, right? We're always, and so I'm just saying that's kind of like an entering wedge. That's kind of like a thing for organizations to say emotional intelligence. Now, here's the second part. For STEM, we all know this is the biggest issue. For STEM, we don't love people, right? So we don't like dealing with folk. So if you are big, and I'm guilty as charged, man, I went into STEM so that I would not have to deal with people. When they challenged me and they said, "Yes, man, are you sure that's the stuff you want to go into?" And these guys were like, business MD, business going in the direction of business, and I was like, I sure don't want to do what you do.
For sure.
So I'm continuing on in this route. You're obviously ignorant, right? But one of the things that I learned dealing with even my mentor that I had and so forth, while he was teaching me, I was working in his lab doing an internship for an entire senior year, and this guy, this is awesome professor, and he, while he was teaching me, because he was actually connecting with, he sort of was doing his own affirmative action. Like he understood the challenges that minorities faced, and he wanted us in his lab. He wanted us. He was an Indian gentleman, and he wanted us to be a part of what he was doing. There wasn't that many of us, but when we showed up, he encouraged us, and he did a lot. He was doing a lot of venting. He felt that he could speak to people such as myself, just to say, hey, stay encouraged. And man, you know what they're doing? You know what they're doing to me and my program? You know what they're doing to me and my lab right now? You know what they're doing with my research right now? You know what this department and that department is trying to do with the research that I have developed. And I said, oh my gosh, I didn't say it out loud, but I said, oh my gosh, so you mean to tell me no matter what level you go to, you still got to deal with people?
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that, and now when I come into the workplace and I'm seeing that, you could do the bench all day long, right? But if you want to move up, these people move up and then they end up in management. And when you're in management, when you're in that role, now you have to deal with people. And and in a lot of STEM environments, like I said, they don't do very well. And
Right.
so when you enter the element of like, hey, uh, in order for us to do better, we all actually need to learn emotional intelligence. We
Yeah.
all actually need to learn to better deal with people, how to speak to people, and that then encompasses the microaggressions and stuff that you end up struggling with, things that people end up struggling with overall. And so that's how I sort of see it, as a catching, a net that sort of catches everything.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. Love it. Especially in these times, in these political times. Um, all right. Last question. As a STEM professional, what can individuals do to be better allies and advocates against microaggressions in the workplace? How can we promote a more inclusive and respectful working environment? So this is the people who are of the majority who don't experience this. I think one of the main things in terms of allies is to be present at events that support marginalized people. Just be present, be there, because what happens is a lot of these types of events, it's the choir, and we're preaching to the choir, and it's like nothing gets done when you're preaching to the choir. I'm sorry. So you need to take yourself and put yourself in spaces, um, be advocates, right? If they're having Black History Month, don't be like, yo, Black History Month is more than just fried chicken and macaroni and cheese in the cafeteria. Like, this is disrespectful. Like disrespectful, okay? Like, and we need to hear it, and we need it to come from you. Because if it comes from me, I'm the angry Black woman, right? So, like, you need to find out what sounds like microaggressions from us, find out from us, and then be our advocate when ideas pop off that sound ludicrous, and they're ludicrous because you've spoken to a Black person and they told you that's ludicrous, so you could say no, they're not gonna, like, Black History Month, please stop serving fried chicken, watermelon, collard greens. You'll be surprised how much that happens. It's ridiculous, unbelievable. Anyways, what would you do to tell somebody who's of the majority how to be advocates and allies?
I think they have to hold each other accountable.
Yeah, you gotta be there.
Um, and sometimes it may have to happen real time.
Yes.
And you know, I know that people want to try to avoid conflict, but there's a way to do it. And this goes back to emotional intelligence, as Howard was mentioning. There is a way to do it in a calm but firm way. But it sometimes, and the thing is, a lot of times they recognize when we are being targeted, and in the moment they can say something. And I know sometimes
Right.
they're afraid to, but I think holding your peers accountable when they're doing this is really important, because I think it holds a lot more weight when it comes from them than from us.
Real time. I love that you said that. Right then. Howie, what do you think?
Oh man, the real time is hard, boy.
I know. And I won't even judge them because it's very difficult for me to hold people accountable real time.
Yes.
It's like you get dumbfounded. You hear somebody say something, you see somebody do something, and it's like you're dumbfounded in your mind, and you're frozen, and like, you know what I mean? So
Like I
yeah,
said,
I'm sorry.
for me, it's when it looks like it's, intentional, or, I end up being, I'm not the witty guy, I'm not the one who's got the clap back right away.
Yeah, me neither.
If I clap back, it's gonna be a clap back.
It's gonna be nasty. It's gonna be
I
hot.
can't. I'm
Yeah.
still from the Bronx. I'm sorry. I can't. I don't know. I'm not very good at. So even though I navigate these spaces, right? I am not. I'm not. I don't play the games.
Yeah, me neither.
So I am not very good at that. That's why I say I roll with my natural bend. My natural bend is to educate and to have a conversation and to want to know more about you. And so, like I said earlier, one of my approaches is doing that, because you already know me, right? You already know me, but you don't know me. Like you work with me, but you don't know me. And a lot of times I've found through the conversations, that's how people realize, where you're coming from. And and I've seen it when I was in school, and I've seen it at work. A lot of time, many times, the root of it, many times the root of it is ignorance. And so they're just not aware of how to how to how to how to address you, like how to speak to you, like how to. And a lot of times they're going off of previous, preconceived notions, things that they've heard, and seen and heard other people say in their communities, etc. And a lot of times they actually are curious. And so we have, I know that's the approach that I take. The approach that I take is, tell me about you, and then this is me, and I respect where you're coming from, and I'm asking you to respect where I'm coming from. In addition to that, part of respecting where I'm coming from is, hey, there's a lot of other folk like me. There's a lot of other folk like me out there. Like you can imagine, because I know for in our situation, a lot of times the issue is that I can't say, hey, why aren't we don't have more of us in this space or in that space. The truth of the matter is they're not applying. Like, so that is true. They're not applying, right?
Yeah.
They don't know about the job that I have.
Right.
Our people don't know about the work that I do a
Yeah.
lot of times. The general population doesn't know about the work that I do. Like it's elusive, right? So I know in my space, at in my organization, there is a lot of work those of us who are there. There is a lot of work. There's a lot of going out to campuses. When COVID hit, There's been a lot of
Recruitment.
virtual recruitment at targeted at HBCUs, etc. So there's a lot of work that's being done. Um, but at the same time, my thing is that, but when they get here, what's going to happen when they get here, right? And so there's some work that needs to be done on the internal end also, so that people are aware.
That's so powerful. Like, I do research for, for 10-Year Me, and it says, so this is the 10-Year Me podcast, just to let you know, trying to get young people seeing what they can do in the next 10 years in regards to STEM. It's an umbrella under Phenomenal STEMist. And in my research for the 10-Year Me podcast and app, um, out of 100% of college students, only 19% major in STEM. Did you know that? Only 19%. 19, not even 20. So 81% of students don't even major in STEM when they go to college. And then of the 19% that do major, 45% of them drop out.
Have
Okay.
you looked at like the trend over years?
Nah, I haven't. That's a good, I'll check it out. That's a good one. But, and that's overall, black, white, everybody. That's not even, that's, that's everybody. So, um, yeah. So like, everything that you guys said is so powerful, so impactful. I'm hoping that this this podcast today was very helpful for people watching. We got a good amount of viewers watching. So I hope that those of you who may not be a part of underrepresented populations have gotten some tools as what to do and understand the importance of it. I hope that we've inspired people of color to be advocates for themselves, push through the microaggression. And we might need to get therapy because the amount of things that we're going through throughout our life, like Howard said, he's like, wait a minute, you still got to go through this. When he was in high college, he was talking to a higher professional person of color. It's like, yeah, you got to go through it for the rest of your career, and that can be tough,
Deterrent.
especially when it's hitting you. But I always say, listen to your body. How does your body feel? Like, what does your body do in response to what somebody says? Because your conscious may miss it, but your subconscious never does. Does your stomach drop? Right? Does your heart race? Do you clench your fist? Do you have goosebumps? Does your hair stand up? Like,
Ooh,
what? That is a sign that something has been done to you emotionally, even though you missed it consciously. Go ahead. You get the final word, Howard.
I'm gonna say this real quick. One of the tools that you can use, right? Learn your personality type. As you
Yeah.
mentioned that, right? It made me think about that. Like learn yourself. Learn part of your own personal development is learn about who you are. Learn about what makes you tick. I said, like what is how is something making you feel, right?
Yeah.
And like I said, when I in certain instances, I'm like a deer in headlights, right? And and one of the assessments I've done is a disc assessment, DISC,
Mhm.
right? And those things have helped me to navigate who I am, why I respond to certain things certain ways, but also how to deal with these people who I'm trying to deal with. A lot of times it's personality
Yeah.
that even drives their microaggressions, or I should say, there's a part of personality can be a huge part of their microaggression.
Absolutely.
So, and other thing I want to say, since I said, hey, a lot of people don't know what I do, I'm a microbiologist for a government agency. So a lot of times people don't know how to even get into the government. USAjobs.gov.
That's a good one, Howard. And you didn't have to tell you what you did. Yeah. USA.gov and
USAjobs.gov.
USAjobs.gov. Thank you so much. We got about 30 seconds left. Kamoy, you have anything to say?
Um, be encouraged. I think this conversation is a little heavy.
Mm-hmm.
It can be discouraging to our aspiring STEMists, but be encouraged. This is a way to just educate you about some of the challenges that we experience, not to discourage you
Yeah.
from going into it. So, we're here as mentors. If you need help, reach out. If you just need somebody to talk to, just know that this is not a saying, don't do this. Is just saying, hey, this is how we've dealt with it. And we're here to help you.
Awesome. Awesome. I am the phenomenal STEMist, and so are they. Thank you guys. Good night. Stay on the line for a little bit. But good night, everybody. Wave to the camera.